So hello guys, welcome to the part 2 of the video where we will talk about government intervention and investment barrier, where political reason, economic reason, international trade, tariff and non-tariff barrier, and FDI barrier, concept of socio-cultural environment, why culture matters in international business, and managing the cultural differences. So first we have government intervention and investment barrier. So it is done to achieve the political, economic and social objective. It creates trade barrier that benefit a specific interest group like domestic firms, industries, labor union. The objective is to create the job by protecting the industries from the foreign competition. Government intervention is motivated by protectionism, where it refers to the national economic policy where there is to control the free trade and protect the domestic industry from the foreign competition. So protectionism is manifested by the tariff and non-tariff barrier. There are two reasons for the government intervention: political reasons and economic reasons. Now, political reasons for the government intervention: it is concerned with the protecting the interest of the certain group within a country, achieving the political objective that lies outside of the economic area, such as protecting ecology, environment, and human rights, where protecting the job and industry. So over here, government has the responsibility to protect the employment and domestic industry from the unfair competition. If unemployment rate is increased and foreign product adversely affect the domestic market, then the political protest against the government is increased. Next is protecting the consumer and buyer, where the protect against the unsafe, unfair and fake goods. WTO permits the country government to reject the foreign product import, so where being the part of sanitary and phytosanitary measures SPS. Next is ensuring the national security, where the government intervene to protect certain industry for the national security and defense related or cottage scale industry. Next is retaliating against the unfair foreign competition, where the government use the threat to intervene the trade policy as bargaining tool to force the foreign country to play by the rule of the game, where the US government threat to take the punitive sanction as penalty against the China to protect the intellectual property right like copyright, patent and trademark. So furthering foreign policy objective is to protect the foreign policy objective. Government may use the trade policy. Example, design its trade policy to give the preferential trading facility to a country which aims to build a close relation. Next is protecting the human rights, where the government intervention on the business of the trade and investment is to force the country to recognize and protect the human right in their country. Now we have economic reasons for the government intervention, where it is concerned with the promoting the overall wealth of the nation to overall benefit for the both buyers and sellers. It is protecting the infant and indigenous industry, where the government should support the domestic industry because they are not ready to compete with the foreign companies. The government may provide the subsidies and other safeguard measures in the favor of domestic firms such that they can stand strong. It is concerned with implementing the strategic trade policy. So implementing a strategic trade policy, it is done as suggest that subsidy can help the domestic firm to gain the first mover advantage in the global industry where the economies of the scale is important. The government through the strategic trade policy can help to raise the country's national. Now we have government intervention and international trade. So trade barriers, there are two types: tariff and non-tariff. Under tariff we have two types: import duties and official prices. So under import duties we have two types: primary import tariff and secondary import tariff. Now under primary import tariff there is three types: ad valorem duty, specific tariff, compound tariff. In secondary import tariff we have countervailing tariff and anti-dumping tariff. Under the non-tariff barrier, there is non-tariff barrier with direct pricing effect, and another is non-tariff barrier with quality control effect. So under the direct price effect, there is subsidies, aids and control, custom valuation. Under the quality control effect, there is quotas, border regulation and standard by local legislation, specific permission required and reciprocal requirement. Now the instrument used by the government to create the trade barrier are tariff and non-tariff barrier. Talking about first tariff barrier, it is defined as the tax or duties levied on the imported goods primarily for the purpose of raising their selling price in importing the national market to reduce the competition for the domestic product. It is done to favor the domestic producers and the government. It is done to protect the domestic producer and also to enlarge the government revenue. There are two types: import duties and official prices. Now first talking about import duties and tariffs. So duty imposed by the country on the imported country known as imported duties. So the tariff is mostly limited to the imports. The first is primary import tariff, where it applies to all except where there is zero tariff, and its types are uh, an ad valorem duty. It is the import duty levied as the percentage of the invoice value of the imported goods. The term ad valorem means according to the value. Next we have a specific duty where it is import based duty, where the fixed sum of money is levied on the physical unit of imported goods, where specific import is specific to quantity of the import. For example, $1 per gallon cost rupees Rs2 per ton. Next we have compound duty, where it is the combination of a specific and ad valorem duty. It is also known as combined rate, where duty are on value based and quantity based. Next we have secondary import tariff, where it applies to the specific import condition only. For example, countervailing duty. It is charged on the import goods to which exporters country have given subsidy, and it is imposed by the importing nation on the imports that enjoy the subsidy in exporting country. Such duty compensates for the special competitive advantage of the subsidy. It is allowed for the exporters government. Next we have anti-dumping duty, where ADD. It is a special duty imposed on the imported goods to protect unaffected domestic industry from injury caused by the sale of dumped goods in importing country. The WTO agreement on anti-dumping allow member nation to charge the same duty to discourage the unfair trade practice in the world when dumping is the main cause to injure the local farm producing. So when tariff is temporary, it is called tariff surcharge. Now we have non-tariff barrier, all this form of discrimination against the import to other than the import duties on the basis of influence. There are two types: non-tariff barrier with a direct price influence, where they influence the price of the goods. For example, subsidies. So subsidies are the direct payment to the domestic company by the government to compensate them for the losses and expenses incurred from selling abroad. They are basically meant for the making companies or the product more competitive in the international business. Next we have aids and loans, where the government gives aids and loans to the country to make their product competitive in those recipient countries. Such fund assistance is also known as tied aid. A loan tied up is important in winning the large contract infrastructure, for example telecom, railway and hydro. Next we have custom valuation, where it is difficult for the custom officials to determine if invoice prices are honest or not. They may be arbitrarily increase the value and other valuation procedure. They can control the trade. Now we have non-tariff barrier with the quality control effect. So import quotas. The import quotas are the numerical limits based on the specific classes of import, that is numerical limit to a specific kind of the product that a country will permit to be imported without restriction during the specified period. Next is voluntary. For example, over here, voluntary export restraint. It is the self-imposed import quota. It is a type of import quota imposed by exporting nations, typically at a request of importing countries. For example, US requested Japan to put a limitation in the automobile export, where Japan limited itself to 1.68 million vehicles per year. Now we have buy local legislation, where introduced buy local laws, where government sometimes implements the law for giving preference to the domestic product. That is, they specify a content restriction that a certain percent of the product is of local origin. Now we have border regulation standard, where importing country government can impose in its rules and regulation on border administration. Such a regulation include the product standard certification like ISO certification, sanitary and phytosanitary SPS standard for the human health and the plant and animal health. Next, there is environmental certificates like CE, like ECO level. Social clauses like provision on the use of the child labor. Next, there is specific permission requirement, where when the country require that potential importer or exporter, they must ensure the permission from the government authority before conducting any trade transaction. Such a requirement is known as import license. Another requirement is the foreign exchange control, in which it requires importers of the certain product to apply to the government agency to make sure the foreign currency to pay for the product. Now we have reciprocal requirement. Under this provision, exporters promise to buy goods and services from the country to which the country export. This requirement is common in aerospace and defense industry, mostly because the importers is short of foreign currency to purchase what it wants. Next, we have government intervention on FDI barrier, where the foreign investment have both positive, good and bad impact on the country economy and the society, where the government use this policy for promoting and discouraging inward FDI. There are two forms: barrier to inward FDI and barrier to outward FDI, where we will discuss about the barrier toward inward FDI, where there is restrict to FDI inward in the host country, where the whole host country can use the wide range of barrier to restrict the inward investment in the foreign country. There is ownership restraint to restrict the flow of foreign investment. The Foreign Investment and Technology Transfer Act (FITTA) prohibits foreign investors to take the investment in the handicraft and cottage industry, airlines, trucking, real estate, and legal and management consultancy. It is done for two reasons: on the ground of national security and competition, and beliefs of the local owners to maximize the resource transfer and employment benefit. Next, we have performance requirement, where there is barrier to FDI flow that control the behavior of the multinational local subsidy. It is concerned with the local content requirement LCR, technology transfer and export. Now government require foreign investor to use certain portion of local content, bring in substantial technology to the host country, export certain amount of the product, hire the certain number of top level managers, and it is done for minimizing the FDI and maximizing the benefit. Now barrier to outward FDI, where restricted outward investment from home country to the host country. As one common barrier is to limit the capital outflow of the country for country's balance of payment. So second, it is done as there is occasional tax rules to discourage the investor towards investing abroad. Now we have socio-cultural environment, we are talking about culture. It is the complex set of rules, custom, value, idea and values and meaningful symbol created by the human beings to shape the human behavior that are transmitted from one generation to another. The culture is shared, dynamic, invented and organized and learned. A company needs a culture knowledge because number of foreign function is increasing, number of country operation is increasing and movement from external to internal handling operation. So why culture matters in international business? First reason, there is varying communication implications where the manager need to understand the implications of the various aspects of the culture. Verbal communication use the words and have meaning. Non-verbal are interpreted and perceived different by the different cultural groups. So first talking about kinesis. So it is study of the body, physical movement, face, eye, gesture, posture, physical appearance, etc. For example, thumbs up is well done in USA and offensive in Greece. Next is proximis. So it means nearness in the space and the time. It involves personal space in how and what we arrange it. The personal space language. It is estimated that up to 18-inch intimate, personal up to 4 feet, social 12 feet and public 12 feet and plus. In USA 5 to 7 feet for the business is considered good, but in Latin America 3 to 5 feet for the business. Next we have time language where there is chronemics, which refers to the time verbal exchange. American expect quick response in the business and uncomfortable at slow response, whereas Japanese seek quiet time for the response and decision making. Next we have physical context where it refers to how color and layout can communicate in the context of our environment. For example, black and gray convey the negative feeling and blue and yellow positive feeling. Layout and design of the surrounding is concerned with the arrangement of the desk, chair, office size, cabin, furniture and etc. Next we have haptics. So it is about the touch language. It refers to the touch while talking face to face, where Latino women expect to touch the hand, shoulder, hair, face, which is not good message in Nepalese society. Now we have varying impact of social attitude and behavior on international behavior. So it is important for IB manager to be aware of socio-cultural behavior of the people in the different countries, where there is first behavioral practice, where there is social stratification, social class, nature of motivation, relationship preference in the organization, risk taking behavior. Next there is cultural practice like ethnicities as difference, language as stabilizer, religion as stabilizer. Now we are varying CSR and ethical standard, where the society's culture certainly can have impact on propensity of the people and the firm to behave in ethical and unethical manner. For example, in USA it is not acceptable ethically, socially and legally in the industry business. Now next we have impact of socio-cultural nonsense. So nonsense means emotional behavioral tone of the people affect their bargaining behavior, which IB managers should understand for doing negotiation in the business. It is not possible until the manager have good understanding of the culture in the various country. Next we have varying customer reaction to the market, where the customer reaction to the farm's market and advertisement across the culture. The manager needs to develop the good understanding of the culture in the country they operate so that they can predict the customer reaction to make the effort, but some might hurt sometimes. For example, Buddha's pictures on the boots and slippers. Now managing the cultural differences. So first reason is managing the cultural shock. So many people get frustrated when entering into the new culture. Things become hard as they learn to as they need to learn and copy with the vast new cultural cues. The cultural shock happening is natural, but time heals it, so recovering cultural shock is a time requirement. So reverse shock, it is the culture shock passes if a person stays in a new culture to understand it and get used to it. Some people encounter the shock when they return back to their home after a long time gap. So it is called the reverse shock, where it happens as they learn to accept what is encountered abroad. Next is managing company or management orientation, where there is first ethnocentrism, where it is believed that one country's culture is superior than other country. Belief that the what work at home is done at the host country as well, ignoring the environmental differences. Next is regionocentrism, where the firm adopts the regional cultural in management, where covering a group of a country live in the comparable cultural characteristics. For example, in South Asia, the premarital sex or live in a relation is discouraged. Next, we have polycentrism, where it fully adapts the business practice to foreign country and culture, where whatever it operates, it carries no home country culture. It is to adopt the local culture of the foreign country. It is done to control the centralized, and manager is free to conduct business in any way he wants. Next we have geocentrism. It is the hybrid of polycentrism, ethnocentrism and regional centrism, where it uses business practices that are hybrid of the home and the foreign norms of the culture. It is usually recommended, for example, if a chief had adapted himself into the local requirement of Nepal, his bank would not have lose highly valuable customer. Geocentric is recommended in the case of cultural differences. Thank you. That is the end of this topic. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe. You guys are amazing. Keep reading.